I'd like to tell you how Bill Gates is fixing the world. And I think I'm completely serious about this, but you'll decide. You should watch the special on Netscape called Inside Bill's Brain. So it's called Inside Bill's Brain. And it's a 3 or 4 part documentary about Bill Gates, and it's a very positive presentation of Bill Gates. And I was wondering why Bill Gates gave so much of his personal time to this project, because it's obvious he spent a lot of time with the interviewer and did lots of interviews, and he walked around with him and spent all kinds of time with him, and that seemed opposite of what I imagined Bill Gates was all about. Now, obviously, he does lots of public events, but it seemed unusual that he would do one that's sort of about him. That seemed completely off-brand, didn't it? And did you wonder about that? It's like, why would Bill Gates be such a big part of this project on a thing that's just sort of about him? Just the opposite of how you imagine him. He just is more about business and getting things done, not about self-aggrandizement. And then I watched it, and then I understood it. So on its surface, there's way more going on than you think. So here's the deal. So most of it's focused on his current life as a philanthropist and the Gates Foundation. There's not so much about his Microsoft past. If you want that stuff, that would be some other content. So they talk about his spending billions to try to build toilets that don't need running water for the third world, and sewage processing. It's hard to watch that part of the documentary because they show you a lot of sewage, and it's more than I wanted to look at, but it's important to make the point of how important it is. Apparently, there were just lots of people dying in Africa from diarrhea. The diarrhea was caused by the fact that their water source and their toilet source were the same place, as awful as that sounds. Right, their sources of water and their sources of bathroom was literally the same place. So they were picking up all these bugs because of that unhealthy situation, and because they don't have access to good medicine, just people were dying from diarrhea. So Bill Gates took on probably the hardest problem in the world, the most disgusting, unpleasant, thankless problem anybody could ever work on. And he's made some progress, but it's a big problem. He did develop a toilet that met those specifications. They built a waste processing plant that doesn't require electricity or running water. Amazing. And they've actually installed it in one city in Africa, and apparently it works. So what it does is it creates its own electricity from the waste that's put into it. It uses that electricity to process it, and the only output is drinkable, clean water. Amazing. And then the other thing he's working on, Bill Gates, is eradicating polio, which turned out to be a much harder problem for a variety of reasons. But he's putting billions into it. So he's dead set on getting rid of polio. It just is way more work than it looked like, and he's going to put it in the work. But that's not what I'm talking about. Those two efforts are amazing. And if that's all he ever did, he's just a treasure to the world. Bill Gates is. If all he did, like you and I are doing that. If all he did was eradicate polio, if all he did was bring clean water to these places in Africa that otherwise wouldn't because of the waste, those are gigantic. But there's something bigger. He's doing something much bigger. And I didn't understand the Netflix special until I put all the pieces together, and it looks like this. Bill Gates also has been working on developing, through his company Terra Power, a Generation 4 nuclear plant that would fix all of the problems of traditional nuclear power. Those problems are it could melt down, so they made a design that can't. If it loses power, it just turns off. It can't melt down. By its design, it doesn't have the ability to melt down. Secondly, it uses for fuel spent waste from other nuclear reactors, and it could use it for hundreds of years, just the stuff that's already waste. So it reduces nuclear waste. It doesn't have the risk of meltdown by design. And, you ready? It's economical. That's the trifecta. Now you say to yourself, great, let's start building them. Remember, this is completely designed. So it's been designed on supercomputers and stuff. They have to actually build it. But it's completely designed. There's no stuff left to design. So Bill Gates was planning to build the first one in China because China is very pro-nuclear. They're building a lot of their own. And he got approval to do it in China, and then trade war. Then President Trump declared a trade war with China. And that nuclear project got killed because it just isn't possible to do it in China right now. It's the most important thing in the world, if you believe in climate change. If you don't believe in climate change as being a problem, it's still the most important thing in the world. Here's why. If you could bring down the cost of electricity and provide it to all the people who don't have it, especially the poor, then what you do for poor people and for the economy in general is huge. And what it does for reducing pollution, because you could get rid of your coal plants and the ones that are really killing people, is gigantic. We're talking about saving millions of lives, even if there's no climate change. Because if you get rid of the polluting sources, I think there were, 800,000 people a year or something are killed by coal, if you just sort of generally calculate how much extra pollution it is and how many extra people die. There are just millions of people dying from pollution, and more millions of people dying that didn't need to from poverty. And having low-cost energy would go a long, long way toward reducing poverty. So here's our situation. And you're probably starting to put you're starting to connect the dots a little bit, but let me finish the picture. So Bill Gates does a special that's unusually personal and completely out of character. Why? Okay, so connect the puzzle. Why does he do this special? And then you find out that his plan to save the world, I'm exaggerating, but maybe not much, by having clean, safe, economical nuclear power has been thwarted by politics. What is the one thing that Bill Gates is really good at? It's not politics. That's not his strength. What he did is what he's good at. He put a ton of money into a risky thing that was entrepreneurial. It required innovation and technology. And damn it, he made it work. He actually made it work. Bill Gates invented clean, economical, safe nuclear power, and he can't get a test site running. Now, just to be clear, we don't know that if he built it, it would work just the way it was designed. It might take an iteration or two to get it right. But they're pretty confident they got it right, or close enough that a few tweaks will get you there. So, now do you understand why Bill Gates allowed a very personal Netflix special about him? He used this to solve the politics. So here's what happened. He puts out this special and he simply makes it entertaining, and he puts a lot of personal stuff in it, so we'll watch. So then I turn it on and I watch. And I say, are you frickin' kidding me? That the only thing stopping us from having economical, safe nuclear power is that he can't get through the licensing process in this country? And then I said to myself, well, how can I help? And so I sent a message to Mark Schneider, our resident nuclear expert / advocate, and I said, do you know anybody at TerraPower I could talk to? Maybe I could help. Because if all we need to do is convince people to do something differently, well, I'm good at that. Maybe I can help. And so Mark contacted somebody on LinkedIn who's an executive at Terra Power, and asked, with the intention of asking him to connect with me. Now, I haven't made that connection. I don't know if I will. But look at all the dots lined up. Bill Gates solved the engineering and the economics of safe nuclear power. And he can't get the licensing in his own country. He had to go to China to even get approval. Now, do we have a president who could solve that problem? Yup. Now you say to yourself, oh, Scott. Nobody can solve that problem. Even a president couldn't solve that problem, because the problem is just problem with red tape, and it's the states, and it's not really a federal problem anyway. It's about the states, and it's the bureaucracy, and there are reasons and variables, and even the president couldn't solve it. It's that hard to solve. Well, we don't have a normal president. We are blessed or cursed, depending on your point of view, with the most unique president in the history of presidents. And there's one thing that this president can do that other presidents can't do. What he can do is the stuff you can't do. Who was it who could move our embassy to Jerusalem? Nobody. And then Trump did it. Who could get elected president with no experience in politics? Nobody. Well, but then Trump did it. Who could remove our troops from Syria? Nobody. It's impossible. Well, Trump just did it. Who could start a major trade war with China and convince this country that maybe we should stop doing trade with them at all? Nobody, except Trump just did it. How many times do you have to see something that can't be done and then watch Trump do it right in front of you? He's the president who can do it. So here's what it comes down to. You and I, because you're part of my system right now, you and I are going to try to find somebody at Terra Power to talk to. Maybe you find somebody, maybe I find somebody, and we're going to find out if we understand the problem, right? Because that's the first thing. You know, I want to understand if the real problem is that there's an entity or groups that are dragging their feet. If we can find a person whose job it is to make this happen and they're not getting it done, that person probably needs some help. Maybe they need a bigger staff. Maybe they need more freedom from mistakes. Maybe they need somebody to do some kind of an executive order or to clear out some paperwork. We're going to find the person, and it might be just one person, maybe a few, but maybe just one. We're going to find the people or person who is stopping Bill Gates from solving the biggest problem in the world. If you think it's climate change, or even if you don't, we just still need clean power. So Bill Gates found a way to weaponize the topic just right. Because it's hard to imagine how hard it is to change people's minds about nuclear power. Imagine how hard it would be to break that red tape. The way to do it is to focus an immense amount of energy at exactly the right point, like a laser. You got a lot of energy, but it's no good unless it's focused. And what Bill Gates did was, just by doing the Netflix thing, I'm pretty sure that his real intention was not self-aggrandizement. In other words, I don't believe that Gates did it, Bill Gates, so that we would have a better impression of Bill Gates. Now, it did have that effect. I mean, you watch that special and you come away thinking, he might be the greatest person who ever lived. He might be the smartest, too. You actually will think that when you walk away. You think, I don't know, he might be the greatest human of all time. I actually went away from the special thinking that's like, well, it's kind of hard to rank all humans, but he might be the best of us. He might be. And he just created a situation where if we help in the right way, we can solve his last remaining problem, which is he can't get it approved in the United States. I think we can do that for him. He set it up. I mean, he set it up. All we have to do is execute. So let's find a Terra Power executive who will talk to us, confirm exactly where the problem is, and then we'll do what we can to put the energy from the government. And if President Trump could be helpful, I know that he would at least listen to the story. Now, here's the fast way to do it. Put Bill Gates and Trump in a room together with nobody else. Just, there could be other people, but, the point is those two people in a room to talk nuclear power. Don't you think that Bill Gates sitting in a room with President Trump could get a nuclear plan approved? I mean, maybe they have to put it in someplace remote. Maybe it's not the ideal location or something, but don't you think they could get that done? I think they could.